as some of the people who are tuning in may know. And I'm an economist, and I'm an independent economist and the founder of think tank Nikore Associates. And this journey has been organic. I don't think that it's been very planned, and I don't think that it was very purposely driven towards setting up a think tank. That, oh, 5 years ago, if someone had asked me, do you imagine yourself to be running an independent think tank and working with multiple types of stakeholders like governments, private sector, and other CBOs, I would say absolutely not. I see myself in a staff position in any of the international organizations. So I think it's a true testament of how we all grow and evolve as people in the pursuit of our passions. And that's, I think, the bottom line of my journey. So when I started as a student, in class 10, I just wanted to join the United Nations. It was my single obsession that I must have a diplomatic passport, and that I must be sitting in, those nice General Assembly rooms and making statements just the way we did in Model UN, when we were kids. But of course, as you move along, you understand some of the areas that you're passionate about, and I had the chance to actually represent the UK at the UN while I was doing my postgrad at the LSE, strangely, and not India. It felt very weird, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But also, I realized that obviously I want to be in a more technical role as an economist, and I joined UN Women soon after my post graduation. Worked in New York for some time, moved to Africa because I didn't want to just get saddled into a developed country role, but really see the ground situation. Worked in Africa for some time, came back to India, and now I'm sort of working at a South Asia level with a number of multilaterals. But the drive to actually have your own think tank was driven by two factors. One was an internal push factor, that I want to be able to have a voice. Because many times, when you're sitting in any of these large organizations, you're at the bottom of the discussions, and on obviously you are junior, but then you still have opinions and you want to have a voice. And especially on gender, I wanted to have a voice, but also on other things, but especially on gender. But the second was that one of my great aunts, she actually commissioned a book, uh, and that book was to look at 70 years of gender equality in India through several thematic lenses. And I was tasked with writing the chapter on the economic journey of women and on women's labor force participation. And I just threw myself into it. And for 2 years, I had to have a team of almost 35 research assistants who worked with me on that chapter to collate the data and to collate this data bank, in a sense, of women's economic journey, labor force participation, and other indicators. And that's when I decided I can never leave this, because when you look at the data from 1955 to 2000, now 1920, you realize that 1718 was 1 year when the female labor force participation actually hit its nadir. And it's just shocking, right? How does a country which is growing see this kind of a curve when on women's workforce participation? So I think that's when the real inspiration came while writing this book, and I think there's no looking back. 1718, and since then it's been rising marginally in the 1819 and 1920 data, but that doesn't account for COVID. And in fact, just yesterday, our seminal analysis was published in the Journal of International Women's Studies, where we contrast the pre-COVID long-term time series, the annual time series, with the monthly data post-COVID on women's labor force participation. And of course, women have had a disproportionate impact. It's been a disproportionate impact on women of COVID. Three important data points come out. In the first month of the lockdown, when March 2020 to April 2020, women's labor force participation contracted by 26.6%, men contracted by 13%. So, there was nearly a double, 2x impact on women in the first month. Then the second wave hits in April 2021, and 80% of job losses that happen in that month are rural women. I mean, it's entirely rural women. And why is that? It's fairly evident, right? It's the care work that they had to undertake during the second wave, because of which they had to completely give up paid employment. And then the third wave, came in January 2021, and we find that even in January 2022, and we find that even in January 2022, women's labor force participation rate is still 9.4% lower than January 2020. That's just pre-COVID. Whereas for men, it's recovered back to pre-COVID levels, basically. So, these three effects, when you take them together, it's a very powerful message and clear evidence that, women have disproportionately suffered when it comes to labor force participation during this crisis. So, I think that's a very interesting question. My mother did economics. One of those, that was one factor, and a huge influencing factor. When I was in school, I remember I just refused to take science, first of all, in plus two. And I think the whole school, for some reason, was up in arms about it, because they said, how can this, class 10 person who's getting above 90%, 92%, that time 90% was a big deal. So, they said, oh, like, how can this person take humanities? Okay, at least take humanities with maths. Don't give up maths. That was the main criterion. But I think it was always a dream to work in any of these international organizations, and the advice you get from people is, oh, do a PhD in economics. The PhD is very important. I haven't done it yet. I'm publishing academic papers without doing it. But the pull of economics was more from a job market perspective, that it was very well accepted in my target job markets. But to be very honest, the internal pull I had was towards psychology. I absolutely loved psychology as a subject in my 11th and 12th, and even now I read a lot of psychology textbooks, etc., just to keep myself abreast of the subject. But it's a real passion area. But I think from a professional point of view, I just made that choice, that okay, it's a good degree to market. I think my biggest influence in my personal life was my grandmother, my mother's mother. And I think even my paternal grandmother was, I mean, I was not that close to her emotionally, but she was definitely an influence because she was a feminist. And my maternal grandmother, in fact, was not a feminist. In fact, had no idea what feminism was, but all her actions were, testament to independent thinking, and absolutely, standing up for her decisions, and not listening to anyone who said, oh, this is how, what are you doing, how can you do something like this? And she lived a very independent life. And I think both of them, in their own ways, had a huge influence. But when it comes to professional influencers, I think it changes over time. I think Geeta Gopinath today is a huge influencer for anybody who's working in international development plus economics, because what she has achieved, it's so relatable. Like, she was just here in LSR like the rest of us in DU, and today she is at one of the highest levels of decision making in an international organization. So definitely she is a influencer from that point of view, and also how she conducted herself and advised countries during the COVID crisis is just so inspiring. It's definitely one person that I really look up to. And aside from these well-known influencers. There's of course Chetna Sinha of the Mandeshi Foundation, and I'm sure we all probably know her. But she is so wonderful to talk to. I mean, when you talk to her and the ground level work she's done, she's a very no nonsense person, and that's very inspiring because she has actually got the trust of a community that listens to her team, and I think that's a huge thing to aspire for in the future for me. Okay, so in the year 2017, I was actually shortlisted for the World Bank's Young Professionals program, and that is a very challenging program. I mean, to get into. So, to just give you a sense of the ratios, around 10,000 people apply globally every year, and they have spots for 40 people, and out of those 40, typically 2 to 3 Indians are in those spots, and there is a preference for women, but that was the only thing going in my favor. um, I was in the top 70, so which meant that I cleared all of the interviews and all of the technical assessments. After that round, it's within those 70, 40 get picked, and I didn't get picked. I was in the top 70. I've cleared everything. I've done all the processes, but I didn't get a job. And after that point, you just feel so lost because you've done everything you possibly could to get there and to you cracked the interview, you cracked all the application forms, materials, everything. It's just that when your CV went around, people didn't pick you. And why do they not pick you? Oh, because you have too much experience in too many areas, but you're not a clear specialist. That's the feedback that I was given. And a lot of people who were actually freshers or PhDs got picked, but because I was not a PhD, I think the advice that I got, in school, beta PhD kar lena, was was a good one. But anyway, so this was a huge setback for me, from a professional goals point of view, because I've been building up to this for a very long time, and also I think personally because you just feel very confused. What more could you do? What more can I do? I've cleared everything. What more can I do? I can't literally go and plead my case, with my application to every office, because your CV is sent to every office in the World Bank's global system. So following that, I kind of made this decision that look, I'm not going to apply for this program again. And that was a very tough decision because you can apply again and again, till you turn 32 essentially. And that time I was 27 or 28. And but I did that because I knew that there's now no point in pursuing this. It's not leading anywhere. And that was also the time, I think about a year after that was when I started research on this book. And I just engrossed myself in doing a lot of advocacy work away from the standard mold of how you're expected to be in international organizations. There is a cookie cutter approach. You are supposed to be a certain way. My profile had been made for that when I was in my first 5 7 years of work experience, and then I kind of felt very free. Okay, now I'm not going to get this YP thing. It's not going to happen. So I have to do other things. And I think I've just been really lucky to have a voice and to be able to do the kind of research that we are doing, and put some numbers out there for global advocacy efforts, national advocacy efforts around gender. And I don't think I would have been able to have a voice if I had pursued that path. And I see that today, but it took me a long time, almost 2 years, to process that loss. Because I think professionally sometimes we don't think that that is a loss, but it's a loss. It is something that affects you emotionally. You can't divorce yourself from the emotional pain of it. So yeah, it was tough. And but now I've reached a point where I'm like happy to advise a lot of international organizations, work on interesting projects, and tap in and tap out as needed, wherever, whether it's international organizations or private sector, or governments or NGOs. So I think our canvas is now very wide, and I'm very, very, very grateful for that. I think to be very honest on that, I haven't had much direct interaction with the government on any of on these topics, because government agencies are, maybe a little higher up in the implementation chain. But in a lot of projects that I've been doing with my clients, not the direct advocacy that Nikore Associates is doing, but a work that we do with our clients, there's a lot of government interface. But they have been many governments, state governments especially, have been very receptive to suggestions that we have given on promoting gender equality. And even the national government, I mean, to be very honest, I think on gender there is a commitment and there is an understanding that, look, there is a lot to be done, and no one is assigning blame to governments, because this is also a social, long term social issue, long term social construct. And again, it's not only in India. So I think it's but no, I have never faced, personally never faced any kind of backlash, or anyone pushing back or refuting the analysis that we are putting out, because I think it's very, very clear, and in many cases uses government data. And we always use official government data for our analysis. So except during COVID, where we have had to use CMIE, because not much government data is available yet. But that also, I hope that the labor force rounds, etc., will restart in another 6 months, and we'll start using government data for that analysis also. So that's number one. Number two, we recently did a series with our partners, another partner organization called Ungender, called States of Gender Equality, where we've looked at, where we've created a whole data bank, and we've looked at how different states are doing on some, thematic areas related to gender, like women's education, livelihoods, and social protection schemes, especially during COVID, entrepreneurship, and many other themes like that, and mobility. And in fact, we have not only chronicled the data from government statistics, but also the efforts that different state governments have taken during COVID, especially to promote gender under each of these themes. And we have been running that throughout March on our social media, and we plan to do it throughout the year to create noise around this. And states are doing a lot. They just, it never comes out in our discourse. And I think even with this, on ground initiative that I'm part of, thanks to my involvement with the World Bank, where we are supporting the Chennai City Partnership in setting up a gender lab. It's a fantastic initiative. It's the first time that a gender lab has been established in a state level corporation like this. And West Bengal government, for example, is doing so many schemes, for women, which are reaching women also. So I think there are, even UP government has a very positive outlook towards inclusion of women entrepreneurs in their ODOP scheme, which is like a flagship government initiative for MSME sector. So I think there is in all the years, in time in history, if there is a time to be pushing for gender equality in with governments, with large multilateral organizations, it is now, because there is a clear recognition that there has been inaction for too long, and there has been a sclerosis in the system for too long, and there is a political will across the board to address it. So I think, because of that, I think I've been quite lucky that I've not had any negative this thing. Yes, there may be delays, there may be, oh, like, okay, this is a priority, but also not a priority kind of situations. But those are less, there's nothing negative that's coming. I have not faced it. I really feel that in the next decade, I want to see a lot fewer women in my friends circle. I'm not even saying, in the whole society, but just in my friends circle, not telling me that they've left their jobs because they got married or because they had a kid. I just want that it should be normalized, at least in a section of our society, if not the entire society, for men to take their responsibilities as, equal partners of running a household, equal partners of, having children. I just want to see that change. And I want to see women a lot more confident in terms of asking their partners for that. I don't think that, I mean, it's so easy when you say it, but so hard in reality, because the bargaining power within a relationship in India, especially today, is very skewed. And why I say India, especially today, is because there is a remnant of, the previous generations and their social norms and expectations, especially from women. But on the other hand, there is a, transition which is happening towards a society which is more liberalized, or, with Western or whatever influences you want to call it, you know. And I think that as these two are meeting, women are getting much worse off, because there is an expectation to be very liberal and date people and meet people and all of that. And then on the other hand, there's an expectation from your family, oh, get married, you're 30 now, get married. And within that, where does your career fit in and where does your work fit in? I'm talking about a very, very urban context. I'm not talking about a rural context here, of course, but I feel like this is happening in through our conversations that we're happening, that we're having with the women in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and even in some of the rural areas. It's happening there as well. It's not just that, this is only in urban circles. And the pressure that women are feeling today to just be super women, to cater to both of these expectations, is too much. And that's one of the reasons why the female labor force participation is so low, because they can't keep up. And I just want to see in the next 10 years, for us to play a small part in it. And I'm sure everybody is, talking about it these days. Wherever I go, at least I'm hearing a lot of conversation, even in wider circles, about the fact that how can we support women to be in the workforce. So, there's no vision of, oh, I want to see 10 million more or 20 million more. I just don't want to hear it every day from my own circle that they had to do this, because every day I hear it from friends, and I don't want my friends as kids to enter into a generation, or my students at Nikore Associates to be telling me this 10 years later that, oh, we're not, we're not working anymore. The women who are working with me, I want them to keep working, you know. And I mean, of course, unless they choose for some reason not to, but they shouldn't feel that pressure. I just hope that that changes. So here's the book, The Indian Women's Journey, Last 5 Decades, where we've got a number of chapters, very interesting analysis, and around. So we've got women's human capital, which is sorry, yeah. So we've got women's human capital, which is my chapter. And but then we've got many other chapters around violence, 5 decades of violence, and like the laws, policies, etc., that came out, women's participation in politics, and women's legal rights and laws. And we've looked at women's participation in civil society and movements. So there are a number of areas that are actually covered in this book. And yeah, this is sorry, yeah, this book. So I think from a paying it forward perspective, it's entirely why I created Nikore Associates. Because in the last 3 years, we've had 250 interns work with us. And while a lot of it may be with for very little pay or almost no pay, because of the fact that we are totally independent and self-run and self-funded, but we don't allow anyone to work unpaid with us for more than 2 or 3 months. It's a standard rule, and then after that, we say, okay, either we recommend you move on, or we're going to put you on a paid position. And this has created a whole community of as I said, 90% young women who are so passionate about gender, but also several of them who are so skilled and have joined, the dev community, or they've joined development sector organizations, they've joined, international organizations, and everywhere they're going and advocating for equality within their projects, and also within their personal lives, where they are, I mean, I hope that they have more confidence to advocate for their own pay, their own wages. I used to be very hesitant to advocate for my for my wages, and even now I don't think I've reached the absolute point of, oh yes, this is how much I should be paid, and this is how much I am paid. There's still a very big gap. But I am still talking about it with people, and I keep asking now. And I think that's what I'm inspiring a lot of my team to do as well, as they move into other roles. And how do I live a more sustainable life? I think I'm making a transition towards public transport, towards having sort of CFL bulbs, etc. in the house. But very honestly, I don't think I live a very sustainable life. And I really hope that in the next few years, I will be able to make more purposeful changes. Definitely in terms of consumption, I'm making a lot of changes. In terms of just being conscious about not buying as many things as I used to, maybe 5 or 7 years ago. I'm definitely making a change on conscious consumption, and recycling my old say clothes, or other electronics even, and how we are disposing our electronics is definitely something that we are very conscious about. But overall, to say, oh, am I taking lesser flights only because of COVID? So I think that's something that's not changing. Am I taking more public transport every single time? No, because of the crowding, and because of the fact that I am privileged, and I know it, and I have to do better on that, definitely.